I've titled this short video A Beginner's Guide to Literature Surveys and Reviews. I've done so firstly because it's a relatively short video, and secondly because it provides an overview. It's based on reflections of reading lots of literature surveys and reviews from students at the postgraduate level. So let's first talk about the difference between a literature survey and a literature review. In the first case, the literature survey is an overview or summary of the available literature. In the second case, a literature review, there's an element of critique where one aims to develop a position. So, in a survey, you're essentially reporting what the literature says without too much in the way of analysis. At the end of that survey, you're likely to create a summary of what's been said. In the case of a literature review, you will gather your literature together and analyse it in a critical way to understand the strengths and weaknesses of what the literature provides in order to develop a position. The literature review is not an opportunity for you to state your own position with selected literature. It provides analysis of both sides of the case in order to develop a position. Let's move on to what are the general purposes of a literature survey or literature review. The first purpose is to document what we know about the topic that you're analysing. So, for example, if you are looking at the influence of social media in education, what we want to find is a body of literature which we can draw on, which will be useful in our own research. The second point is to identify how do we know what we know. The question here is what sort of knowledge base or what sort of evidence base is the assertions made by the authors of these pieces of work that you're reviewing or surveying to come to their own conclusions. Is there an evidence base is an important question to ask. Is this purely an opinion of the author? Is it an assertion? What are the assumptions that underpin the analysis and conclusions that these authors draw? And what sorts of evidence bases do they draw on? Are they qualitative or quantitative? Is it a small or large scale study? Is it short or long term? And importantly, what was the context in which they did their research? Depending on the sorts of research that you're conducting, you may well draw from a wide range of sources. These might include things like blogs and wikis, the popular press, professional journals and newsletters, peer-reviewed journals, and book publications. It's critical that you inform the reader of your literature review or survey the types of documents that you've drawn on, and to be specific about those as well as the evidence bases that they supply. So here we're providing the reader of our literature survey or review with a detailed overview of the works that we ourselves have been reading. The third question to ask in terms of general purposes is what are the competing views? It's very important to ensure that you gather literature that is not just supportive of your own assumptions and biases, but also literature which addresses the other side of the argument. And finally, the fourth question here, where are the silences and gaps? This question is the second side of the coin, whereas in the first three questions we're looking at what literature has told us and what literature is available. In this case, we're trying to determine what it is that the literature that we've looked at does not address, either consciously or unconsciously. That is, where are the gaps in the literature? Now let's move to some general advice about literature surveys and reviews. It's important that you inform your reader of how your literature survey or review was conducted. Which databases did you consult? Which sources did you use? What were the key words that you used? What were the limitations that you put on your literature survey? Secondly, in recording your literature survey or review, it's usually preferable, not always, but usually preferable to move from the general to the specific in terms of the literature you draw on. So again, in the example, of social media in education, where we are focusing on one social media, Facebook, it would be wise to draw on literature that deals with social media generally and address that before addressing literature that addresses Facebook specifically, before coming to a conclusion at the end of the literature survey or providing an overall summary. It's very important that you attribute all statements and indicate the sorts of evidence bases. And finally, be careful of your own biases and assumptions. I've made a point of this in this short video on 3 or 4 occasions and stress its importance, as many, particularly new researchers, try to aim to prove a point which they themselves have reached without necessarily undertaking the required evidence gathering and analysis. So I hope this beginner's guide to literature surveys and reviews is useful to you. Bye bye.